Hello everybody. Hello my friends. This is Ângela Diniz, murdered and convicted. And before jumping into the events of this TV show, I'm going to introduce you the character itself because it's based on the real life stories. So Ângela Diniz was a well-known figure and a prominent socialite in Brazil before the tragic events involving a shooting at her home. She was a millionaire and she moved in elite circles in Rio de Janeiro, earning the nickname Panthera de Minas, the Panther of Minas, due to her beauty, strong personality, and independent lifestyle. Her life was often featured in social columns and tabloids due to her high-profile relationships, divorce, and a reputation for a free-spirited lifestyle. So basically, in my words, I would put it like she left basically her husband, Milton, because she tired of being, restricted by the society, by the societal expectations at that point in Brazil. And that was so common in 1970s in Brazil, when basically the society dictates you how to behave or how to basically lead your life. And after she tired of that, something happened that basically influenced a lot her choice, because after her friend basically was killed by her husband, after her friend was killed by her partner, she realized basically that nobody seems as, as basically well intentioned as it seems at the beginning, because nobody actually would tell that something like this would happen. But for Ângela, basically her own marriage was something that she basically, she was trying to basically find somebody who would appreciate her personality and not to basically, make her live a lifestyle that she doesn't want. So that was the main basically core of this character, I would say. And as I told you before, she was basically a prominent figure, and a lot of basically news covering every basically event happening in her life. And due to her first husband, Milton, who was engineer, she basically managed to build her career and to basically raise 3 children. But in this TV show, only one of her children shown, because another 2, they were basically left out for specific reason, because it's based on the real stories. So the point is Ângela Diniz and her basically murder, how basically she got murdered and convicted. This is the point of this TV show, because the blame shifted and the victim basically turns out to be the reason of the murder, not the killer. So this is the main, the story of this figure. And in Brazil, basically at that point in 1970s, there was specific law. I don't know if it's still there. I don't know if it's still viable, but that law basically is something like justifying men defending to basically defending their name or their reputation and justifying killing to defend their reputation, something like this. But in professional terms, in more official terms, it's actually, it has specific term. I would not like, I don't know exactly the point of this law, but due to basically that specific law, Ângela was convicted because her basically boyfriend, he was justified because of the law. And so the story basically starting with the final stage of the TV show. It's showing you the consequences, the events that happened before, that happened in the final, in the last basically moment of Ângela Diniz's life, and how she basically was convicted. But before that, basically a lot of happened, and she basically moved to Rio de Janeiro. And after basically she left her first husband, Milton, she was condemned by her mother because of how basically that decision was so like, spontaneous, because everybody at that point basically would choose to stay and to pursue this life because her lifestyle basically and her marriage considered to be like the most prestigious one. But for her basically the only lifestyle she actually preferred is the one where nobody actually just expects anything from her. So due to basically her free-spirited personality and her friends at that point, she also basically left her husband. And before even moving to Rio de Janeiro, she basically and her friend, they both basically left their families, and she left her 10 years marriage, which is just a huge change. And basically united by this huge change, she and her friend basically they were trying kind of to embrace this new life. And after basically her friend was killed, something really just something really just happened in terms of her character and how she is transitioned into completely different and I would say more brave woman. And she was already in love with another man, married man, Tuca. Basically, at that point in Brazil in 1970s, the divorce it was illegal, so you couldn't just divorce someone and remarry somebody else, because at that point basically only legal separation and dividing all the assets, but without possibility of remarrying. So after she basically divorced her husband, she couldn't basically marry somebody else legally. And she lost basically her custody of her children, of her daughter specifically, because this is the only children covered in this TV show, but she had 3. And basically after she left her life in Minas Gerais in Brazil and moved to Rio de Janeiro, she decided to leave behind all the life she had in her childhood city and to leave all the basically troubles, all the tragedies happened, because another huge event that influenced her moving to Rio de Janeiro was basically an incident happened at her place with her boyfriend at that point, married man Tuca, and a man for whom basically she left her husband, her first husband. And basically when they were together, they are basically housekeeper, caretaker. He was trying to enter the property, he was trying to come in, but he wasn't basically aware that Ângela wasn't alone, that she has a guest. And because of the circumstances, basically her boyfriend Tuca, she went to check and he ran into her caretaker, the housekeeper, and he shot him basically, but that was only an accident. And after that happened, basically Ângela faced a lot of she faced a lot of legal issues due to this murder of her housekeeper. And because she didn't witness that herself but only heard that shooting, she decided basically to take the blame of that murder and to kind of cover her boyfriend Tuca, maybe due to her life and her exposure to all the social medias outlets. She wasn't basically ready to to be involved in another scandal related to a married man, because she was basically dating a married man, and that would be a huge probably scandal. But I don't think that it would be more scandalous than false confession as it was, because she said that that was self-defense and that they were trying to just defend their property, but that was the caretaker, the person who was supposed to be there, the housekeeper. And after she basically took the blame for that murder, police basically realized that she was lying, that it wasn't really her, and she was forced to tell the actual person who was behind it. So she gave her boyfriend's name, and she kind of cleared herself from that murder, but she was already basically on all the news, and every basically event like this was further just complicating her life, because she was really just forced to leave her city, Minas Gerais state of Brazil, to go to she was forced to go to Rio de Janeiro. And Rio de Janeiro basically, as you know, is a capital of Brazil. But the reason why she went specifically to Rio de Janeiro, because she had a friend, and she had a friend living in Rio de Janeiro who was basically the best, I would say, and the closest friend of Ângela's. And she has a lot of she has a lot of friends and a lot of, interactions in this TV show. But from all of the basically people, that was the one who was just helping her unconditionally, because other people, they only recognizing her because of her, coverage from the news, from the magazines. They were basically recognizing her from the news. So they were kind of trying to jump on this hype train. They were trying to get to know Ângela because she was famous and kind of get advantage of this. But since basically Ângela kind of enjoyed that lifestyle, and she actually enjoyed to be an independent woman, and after leaving her husband and leaving her boyfriend who was involved in that crime, she finally started her new life in Rio de Janeiro, and she was basically facing another trouble, and that was related to her not being able to rent her own place, because every basically place she wanted to rent, every place basically needed a guarantor, a person who would basically, make a deal with Ângela to guarantee that if she is not able to pay or something like this, somebody would cover those, and somebody would cover those bills or something like this. So due to her not being able to find that guarantor, she was ready to basically find another ways to work out this. But it was not because she didn't have money, because she was a rich person. I said before that she is from a wealthy family, and she still had her jewelry, she still had some money, and definitely she is not a poor person. But she was basically willing to rent the most luxurious apartment, or something like with the access to the beach, and she was basically looking for that place. And she asked her basically first husband, whom she left, to be a guarantor for her. But of course, she basically rejected. And after he rejected to be a guarantor for Ângela, she was kind of upset, because now the only way to find a guarantor, to find a connection, to find the right person, and in general to build your own friend circle in Rio de Janeiro, she was attending parties and events. Like, usually these type of events, they basically gather all the people, all the socialites, from journalists to like big businessmen. And she basically dragged a lot of attention. In just one night, she was already put on the news, and her appearance in Rio de Janeiro basically made a lot of noise. And she was called a Panthera of Minas, or a Pantera de Minas. So this is because of her beauty and because of her, how she basically appearing on public, and how she basically so put together. People compare her to a panther. So basically, in Rio de Janeiro, she already made some friends, and those friends included also like some famous people. For example, this woman was an actress, and all of her new friends, they were literally just living at the beach. They were doing like nothing but relaxing and enjoying the sun, and just leading the most, I would say, luxurious lifestyle possible. But to be a part of this, she was invited to a lunch, and she went basically to get to know that people, and to get basically a part of this community, because they were not just, friends. They were seeing Ângela as somebody who embodies that free-spirited woman, and compared to her, they were more conservative and restrained by societal expectations, and they basically considered Ângela as well a good friend due to her different personality, and how she basically easily making it about her. No matter where she goes, she's making it about herself. And of course, it caused a lot of jealousy in her new friend circle, but most of the women from her new friend circle in Rio de Janeiro, they genuinely loved Ângela for her personality, and because she just really does not care about what people think about her. And this that was something basically they were missing in their own personality. So they were trying kind of, to be around Ângela as long as possible. And that was so perfectly shown in the second half of this season, I would say, because literally everybody she runs into immediately just, becoming a huge fan of Ângela, or at least trying to be a friend with her. And on her side, it didn't even take a lot of effort just to be herself. Genuinely just stay herself. And by staying herself, she was able to also draw a lot of attention from men as well as from women, but she mostly focused married men, and her basically flirtatious and playful personality, but she didn't really pursue or chase them. She was basically doing what she usually does. She was just, she was just really friendly, I would say. But of course, some men, and specifically in her situation, because she is very attractive woman, some men would basically take it as a flirt or as something like a potential love interest. So they basically immediately just falling for Ângela, even though she didn't mean in some situations to basically make them go after her, but she was able to basically get almost every man, no matter married or single one, but she literally just, she seduced literally everybody. And after basically after she was trying to find her own place, she found the only way basically is to get some place that a place that basically doesn't ask somebody who doesn't ask a guarantor. So she gave up on all the places she wanted to rent, and she rented basically something less luxurious, something less, desirable, but she didn't have a lot of choice, so she basically chose something available and without really access to a beach or something like this. But she finally got something, and she was able to finally take her daughter to Rio de Janeiro, because her daughter basically left in her previous town, and her daughter basically with her husband with Angela's husband, and to be able to take her daughter to Rio de Janeiro, not only does she need a place of her own, but she needs basically a custody, and she lost that custody after basically she divorced her husband because he convinced that Angela's lifestyle, her promiscuous lifestyle, her adultery, it doesn't fit in raising child, type of lifestyle. So basically her husband made sure that he solely had that custody, and Angela's mother, she also had that custody. So her husband and Angela's mother, they share that custody over Angela's daughter. But for her to be able to take her daughter to Rio de Janeiro, she needs just legally to make this happen, not just to take her physically, because it would be considered as kidnapping. And this is exactly what happened after she took her daughter, because her husband didn't let her daughter and her grandmother, Angela's mother, to go to Rio de Janeiro. She basically came back to her town in Minas Gerais, and she took her daughter. She took all the jewelry, all the belongings, and she took her daughter without basically telling her husband. And of course, that was basically supposed to be a big trouble legally. Once her ex-husband finds out, it will be some trouble. But at this point, she just returned to Rio de Janeiro, and after bringing all her jewelry from Minas Gerais, she basically sold all her jewelry to her friend's mother, because her friend's mother apparently was also a rich woman, but Angela needed some money because she needed to join a club. And basically that wasn't just a regular one, because that was equestrian club. And equestrian club is a place basically where people ride horses. And to be a member of that club, she needed like some money for entry. And so after she sold all her jewelry, she was able to get accepted to that club. So after she got accepted to that club, she was officially a part of she became officially a part of this community. But she also she got new acquaintances. Like, for example, this man was a big figure working in news outlets or something. Like, he was basically covering news about Ângela once she arrived to Rio de Janeiro, and she got on that magazine because he noticed her in that club. And in general, basically every man, basically married one or a single man, immediately just trying to draw your attention, even though Ângela really just, she was trying to spend this time in Rio with her daughter after she took her. Even in front of basically her children, men that basically attracted to Ângela, they were trying basically to do whatever it takes to, draw your attention. But for Ângela, the only trouble that basically complicated her life in Rio de Janeiro once she arrived was that she didn't consider that bringing her child, bringing her daughter to Rio de Janeiro without asking her husband, her ex-husband, it would immediately cause her trouble, because he just came to take his daughter back, because legally, basically, she doesn't have a custody over her daughter. Only her mother, her daughter's grandmother, and her ex-husband. So he took back his daughter and Ângela's daughter. But after that, basically, she was trying to find a legal way to get that custody back. And while basically she was trying to do that, she at the same time was attending parties, some events. She was trying to not think about that, but at the same time, basically all her friends, all her new friends, they were kind of affluent people, and almost each of them has some type of connections in Rio de Janeiro, and basically she could have used potentially any of those connections to get that custody over her daughter back, or to find another place, a better place to rent, to find that guarantor, or whatever. Basically, she could have used in any way any of those men, because they were kind of everybody. Each of those men from her friend circle, they were hitting on Ângela, and almost every single of them had some type of affair with Ângela. For example, you can see 3 different men on this picture, and at this specific moment, she was only with one of them, the closest one, and he was basically he was also a married man. But the worst thing is that he was married to Ângela's friend, and she was kind of doing that behind her back. But it wasn't just her fault, because her friend's marriage was kind of already shattering. It was literally just on the brink of collapsing. So she just got in the middle of that, and she didn't basically make him cheat on his wife, but she just naturally making every man, basically everybody, just trying to hit on her. And some of her basically tricks, as I noticed, is the way basically how she interacting with people, because she did not just verbally flirting, but she is trying to like physically, she's trying to show that there is no literal like boundary between being friends or being, you know, partners in a relationship. And she's crossing that line because that line is just so blurred. And it doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man, she's just immediately erasing that line. But it's both bad and good, because boundaries also like necessary to create healthy relationship or friendship. But by showing how like crazy she is, that she is ready to just go and kiss a waiter, just literally a random man, she's showing that for her those boundaries, those lines, they just do not exist. And she is just at the same basically event, she hooked up with a brother of a man with whom she had an affair and who is married to her friend. So basically, she hooked up with two brothers, but not at the same time, but still. After doing so, she kind of pissed off one of those brothers who was basically ready to kind of give up his own marriage for Ângela. He literally almost left his wife once Ângela arrived to Rio de Janeiro, because he immediately just, fell in love with Ângela. But again, she didn't mean that. It wasn't her intention. It wasn't her initial goal to make him leave his wife or to make him cheat on her. She didn't make that or anything else on purpose. And since it looks like she really didn't mean that, it's causing like those men who cheated and lately they found out that basically she was just, friendly and overly playful or something like this. And because of how different she is, they think that this is her fault or that she made them do that. But in contrary, they did that because they wanted that. So basically, her friends basically this is her friends with whose husbands she had an affair, and at that point she already knew that basically her husband was unfaithful and that he was hooking up with Ângela. But even in her behavior, you can see that she didn't really blame Ângela for what happened. She didn't really try to put all the blame on her, but she knows that her marriage wasn't really perfect, that her husband basically was the one who should be blamed for it. But she anyway confronted Ângela, of course, because now Ângela, after arriving to Rio de Janeiro, she just completely changed the weather. She just made a lot of noise and a lot of, a lot of her actions just impacting other people. So no matter if she likes it or not, or if she is making that on purpose or not, she is affecting other people, including her friend, and she is getting in another trouble with drug possession. And this basically was due to her hooking up with that man whose brother was basically jealous of that because she initially hooked up with him, and he basically put Ângela in this situation, or at least they were suspecting that it was him who left those drugs and who made it look like Ângela was in possession of that. And she got in another scandal, of course, because of the drug possession. And at that point, basically, her focus mostly was to get back her custody over her daughter. But now she needs to prove that she is not addicted to drugs, that she didn't possess any of those, that she was framed, basically. But at the same time, something else happens, and her friends basically got pregnant, and that happened at the same time, basically, while Ângela was hooking up with her husband. And now basically her friend got pregnant from a man who was unfaithful and who was partly basically the reason why Ângela was so empathizing to this woman, because she knows that her husband basically cheated on her and that she needs support, because now basically Ângela caused a lot of trouble already, and that woman, that friend of hers, confessed that she already knows that Ângela and her husband, this woman's husband, they were having an affair. So she already knew that, but she didn't act crazy, or she didn't try to cause any scandal or to put Ângela on the spot. She was trying kind of to resolve the situation in a friendly way, and she told that basically it wasn't on Ângela because their marriage was already, collapsing. So she didn't basically lose loyalty from any of her friends, while she was kind of the reason, or at least she triggered those marriages, those men pursue her, go after her and cheat on their wives. But she was able to basically keep everybody on her side, literally just having no enemy, only her ex-husband, who made sure that she would lose that custody over her child. That was probably the only enemy, and of course, a man who killed her finally. And as we know, that Ângela Diniz was murdered, and because of her boyfriend's jealousy. But before that happened, she had another affair with, or let's say it's not even an affair, because this man is not even married, as far as I know. She was in this relationship. She was with a man who was basically working on those outlets. He was a columnist, and that columnist who covered Ângela, who put her on the news once she arrived to Rio de Janeiro. So he noticed her. That basically columnist noticed her once she arrived, but she got into relationship with him just because she needed somebody who would basically provide her with everything she needed to get that custody over her daughter back. So she needed somebody to legally make it passable. So this is why she basically got into relationship with this man. But initially, basically, when she proposed that to him, it wasn't really like a big problem, because he probably just already knew that it wasn't really built on like love or something, that she needed just, his connections, his influence. And of course, that man basically, he was a really rich man, and he has another friend who basically became another love interest of Ângela's, because once basically she got introduced to that friend, she already knew that at some point basically she would try to pursue him. But that man, of course, he was married, and once basically they spent some time with that family and got to know each other, once basically she was introduced to that man, who was also from a wealthy family, but he didn't have any like merits of his own, because he was kind of similar to Ângela because his origins as well from a wealthy family, but his lifestyle also something like Ângela's, and due to that basically he wasn't really like, financially stable, I would say. So she found somebody who is just, he found basically somebody who is, spiritually and who is personally just so familiar. She found basically that man the most like the closest one, and somebody who she can be really just together. So after basically she got introduced to his family, she went to another club, and this time the difference is that they were already coming back to Ângela's place, and after basically she came back to her, at that point, to her place in Rio de Janeiro. She was trying basically to reunite with her friends and to make that basically a new friend of hers. She was trying to make him basically do a favor for her, because her current basically boyfriend, he wasn't ready to give her what she wanted, and she wanted basically to help her with regaining that custody over her daughter. So since he wasn't able to provide her with that, because it needs for Ângela, it takes her to be legally married. She needs that to become to get that custody back. So she needed somebody who is ready to marry Ângela. And this is the only way she can basically get back that custody over her daughter. I'm not sure how she can marry somebody, since we know that basically that law prohibits anybody to marry again once you divorced somebody. In Brazil, basically it was impossible to remarry, because at that point in 1970s there was a law that basically made it impossible to divorce, but only legally separate from somebody and to divide all the assets, but without possibility to remarry someone else, to marry someone else, because at that point, basically, a lot of, you know, in 1970, specifically in Brazil, a lot of basically legal troubles and limitations for Ângela basically made her to resort to those, basically made her resort to actually just whatever it takes to get that custody over her daughter. So after her boyfriend, a columnist, he rejected to get married with Ângela because for him it was just unnecessary, since Ângela was only trying to get married because her custody basically would come back, and she was motivated by that. But a part of that, basically, there wasn't love, there wasn't any like real connection, so it was kind of, one-sided. So she left that man once she realized that basically he is not the one who she wants to spend her life with, or with whom she can get her daughter back. So she left him for that other man she got to know before, and who was a friend of this man, columnist. But before leaving that man, she was already like making sure that this one is waiting for her and that he is ready to leave his wife for Ângela. She knew that once she basically arrived, he would already just ready to get out of with Ângela and to do whatever basically it takes for Ângela to be happy. So once she arrived, basically he immediately just grabbed all his things and left his wife. But in his situation, it was kind of similar to Ângela's first husband, because when Ângela was leaving her first husband, she left behind all, like, the house, everything, but she did get some, assets, but for her it wasn't really that important. And this is why she chose this man, because he is doing the same. He was leaving a wife from another basically wealthy family. Her life Ângela basically left her life behind in her city. Once basically she left that behind, she was already basically once she left that behind, basically she was kind of, doing actually wherever it takes, because there is not a lot of choices for Ângela. And even though she seems to be regretful, she seems to be really remorseful about this decision, because it looks kind of embarrassing, the way that basically that woman kicked out the way basically that woman kicked out her husband out of her house, and the way basically that she didn't try really to keep him. It seemed pretty much embarrassing, because it just shows how unworthy and how little value he has for that woman. So it could have been really a red flag for Ângela, since she basically witnessed that woman so easily got rid of her husband, that she didn't try to keep him, and that she immediately gave up on her life with him. So it could have been really a signal for Ângela not to pursue him, but since she didn't have any choice, and she wanted somebody who would be ready to help her with getting back her custody over her daughter, he chose to pursue him. Even though this man, Doka Street, he will be the one who murdered Ângela. And that man, Doka Street, also from a wealthy family, but for Ângela it wasn't really important at that point, because she didn't basically choose him because of his origins or because of his financial situation or whatever. She just chose him because he was ready to give up his life and to basically do whatever it takes for Ângela to be happy. So nobody really condemned Ângela from her friend circle. Nobody actually, nobody tried to convince her otherwise. And it seemed really to be a good choice. Even her ex, he basically reacted pretty adequately, because he knew that he was not able to give Ângela what she needed, and she asked him for that help with a custody over her daughter. And since he was not basically ready to do that, to marry Ângela, to make her officially married, she did what she did. She chose another one. Even though still she choosing a married man, and she considered to be a home wrecker because she did make them separate. The final choice was behind that man, Doka, and he chose to immediately leave his wife and go with Ângela wherever she wants. So as much as you know, as much as it's like happy sounds for Angela, it's not really what, you know, initially basically what she valued in that man was his willingness, his readiness to make Angela happy, to make her, you know, a mother again. That's what she wanted. But this basically relationship immediately shifted towards a toxic one. Not only because they were kind of both leading the same lifestyle, they were literally just, doing whatever they want. They hooked up with a woman. They they both basically prefer to lead this lifestyle, and it wasn't a problem at the beginning. But once basically your new boyfriend started to get jealous, he literally just, started to getting jealous because of everybody, because of Angela's interactions, because of how she basically flirting with other people, even though initially basically they were both satisfied with this lifestyle. They were both basically initiators. It wasn't just her single-handedly making this, promiscuous lifestyle. Because on his side, basically, he was doing almost the same, from leaving his wife and basically him leaving his wife, and Angela leaving her husband, and Doka leaving his wife, and then basically they just doing the same things literally. So they both looking for that lifestyle, which is that basically lifestyle in Brazil at that point. It was something that basically other people, like more conservative ones, they couldn't basically afford it. So for Angela, basically, it seems like a normal and a lifestyle of an independent woman. Basically, she wasn't really just trying to, she wasn't really trying just to be a home wrecker, and she wasn't trying just to split other families or to just, make them unhappy. But she was ready to get together with a married man if she basically saw that that marriage, for example, wasn't really a happy one, that that man was ready to quit, that he was ready to give up on his marriage, that he was already considering that. And then basically she is making it passable. I'm not justifying any of this. I'm not saying that this lifestyle, this like adultery, this type of lifestyle is okay. I'm not saying that the consequences of this type of lifestyle is, not terrible. They are, especially in your case, but I will come back after a little break. So what we stopped on? I just noticed that the footage just zoomed in too much, so it should be like this. So nobody can really justify the being unfaithful or leading like double life or being a home wrecker, making other marriages, destroyed. You cannot justify that, but you can basically see the actual reason behind that and why basically people like this, they so easily quitting like 10 years marriages. Why they do that? Why they can easily just give up on the life they built? And it's not even about the quitting your marriage, about divorce, because divorce even not possible in 1970s in Brazil. There wasn't really like legally divorce or something. They were doing that, specifically Ângela. They did that because she tried to pursue a life that basically that was only possible if she was a part of her traditional lifestyle, of her marriage, of her husband. So did her boyfriend, Doka Street. So they both did the same thing, but their personality, their basic lifestyles, even though they are like similar, their personalities, they are different. And I would say they are completely different. And at this point, basically, the most basically trouble in Ângela's life, and the biggest trouble that caused her life, that caused her lose her life, the trouble that basically happened once she got back with her boyfriend Doka, after basically they already kind of split up. They were already facing a lot of basically problems, and she was ready to kind of leave him and to break up with Doka, but he was basically insisting on her coming back because he just convinced Ângela that he could change, and that finally basically Ângela, she could change him, that Doka basically needs Ângela because this way basically they both can be who they want. And at the same time, basically, she was already kind of not sure that she wants to stay with him because he was aggressively like jealous of all her interactions, of how she basically having so much friends, and how she's not really like separating like casual, friendly interactions and flirting. She's really just not separating those things, but it only like seems like she's not, because in this TV show it looks a little bit exaggerated due to basically creators probably was trying, the director of this TV show was trying to basically make more drama of her biography, even though she wasn't explicitly like having relationships with both men and women. In this TV show, they made her basically that way to show that she is just open to everything and she is not restricting, she is not basically limiting her choices. She is not like, you know, she's not trying to put labels on anything. So this is why basically she has so many friends, and a lot of those friends, a lot of friends of hers, specifically women, they seem to be really just more than just friends, because how Ângela interacting and how she is basically making it seem like they are romantically interested in Ângela. For example, even like little interaction like this, it seems to be like a reason for a jealousy, but the way basically her boyfriend Dorka reacts, it seems to be too much, even though Ângela is a beautiful woman and he basically, Dorka has pretty viable reasons to be jealous, but Ângela proved that in her previous relationships, that was already like existing, and at least basically Ângela didn't like, hide that fact that she is open to something new, that she basically not limiting her choices. Even with her boyfriend Dorka, they both basically hooked up with another woman, so he knew basically that his girlfriend, she is not like, monogamous. She is polyamorous. She is maybe bi, but her being bisexual is not a fact from her biography. It's not like confirmed that she was, but it was obvious that at some point something could happen, and that the jealousy would basically, get to really extreme level. So basically that's what happened. Once basically Dorka ran into Ângela flirting with another woman, and that was just a new friend of Ângela's, a woman from Germany, also Portuguese, but she came from Germany, and they were just, they were really like enjoying this night, and her boyfriend Dorka, he is a boss killer, not because he is constantly just trying to get Ângela under his control and to prevent her from flirting with anybody, and he's trying to intervene any possible moment when he feels like he's about to cheat on him. But he is in general, he is a person who ruins any moment when he sees basically that Ângela having fun, that she's not just trying to basically hook up with somebody, but she is genuinely having good time. He is trying to kill that for her. And that was already a big red flag, because somebody is constantly just trying to somebody is constantly trying to tame her, to put her back in her place. He was trying to put her in his pocket, to be a housewife, to be a he wanted just another, apparently, type of woman. But initially, basically, that was the reason why Ângela so easily attracted Doka. Her playful personality, her attractiveness, her openness to something other women, they were not really ready. Initially, basically, that was something that he fell in love with. He basically valued those, characteristics. But now he seems to be so opposed to that lifestyle. Now he seems to be agitated by all her actions, any interaction, causing him a lot of stress. But he is also addicted to drugs. In this TV show, it explicitly just showing him being addicted, and he is not all the time thinking adequately, but he is kind of torn between keeping this lifestyle and just putting up with everything. But at the same time, it is obvious that he is not stable anymore. And specifically in this basically episode, it was not final, but it was episode 5. And we still have episode 6 next. But it was already obvious that he is about to lose it. And since basically Ângela, she was trying to get loose, she was trying to kind of not being a captive woman. She was trying to spend time with her friends, and she brought basically all of her friends from Rio de Janeiro, and she threw some party. Of course, her boyfriend Doka, basically ruined that party as well. But at that point, basically, neither of them not Angela nor Doka were ready to like compromise, because they both were doing what they wanted. He was addicted and she was basically doing something that basically I don't think that she was doing anything wrong, but from Angela's perspective, he was the one basically who was holding back Angela from, from a life basically that she wanted. And kind of in her basically story, the only basically reason why this case, her murder, basically caused a lot of noise and public outcry, because after basically Doka murdered Angela, that law, legitimate defense of honor, that was applicable, and due to basically that law, a controversial one, and Angela basically initially was a victim, but they made it look basically as he was a victim. So it's just shifting responsibility from the attacker to the victim, implying that the victim caused their own harm. And why it caused so much like protests and all the like, and why this story is still like so relevant, because anybody can really just relate to this story, because in every basically country there is instances of something like similar to this story of Angela. But it specifically basically triggered a huge protest in Brazil, and in Brazil specifically, Angela, she considered to be that cultural phenomenon. She is considered to be that person basically. So since I feel really bad, I'm really sick, and I'm not sure if I'm able to properly speak English or whatever, if I'm able really just to convey my, information. I'm going to end this stream, but I would really like to make this video like one more time. Maybe when episode 6 comes out, I will make another one, but when I will be more like, healthy, because now I'm really feeling sick. And I just cannot think about this TV show because there is a lot of really information you need to know about this TV show, but I wanted to make this stream once again, but with all the episodes, and when I will be more ready for this. But anyway, thank you for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye.